Okay, so this is page 1 of section 1 of the Sound Reinforcement Handbook, and I'm going to be explaining it for me later, just because I'm an idiot, and you're an idiot too. And this is confusing stuff. So, what is a sound system? Well, a sound system is a sound reinforcement system, but they'll use the term sound system to refer to a sound reinforcement system. And these sound reinforcement systems are not generally as simple as like home radios or stereos or whatever, but they do operate on the same principles. They require a higher level of understanding from the user, though. So a sound, what is sound? A sound is acoustical energy. It's fluctuating waves of pressure in the air through a physical medium, the air. Sound is just wiggly air in idiot terms. Wiggly air. A complete cycle of an acoustical pressure wave consists of 1/2 cycle of compression and 1/2 cycle of rarefaction. And compression is a higher pressure, and rarefaction is a lower pressure. And 2 half cycles make one complete cycle. So when I say higher pressure, it's 1/2 cycle of compression of air molecules. And so sounds of higher amplitude or louder compress and rarefy the air molecules to a greater extent than do lower amplitude or softer sounds. So in idiot terms, one cycle of an acoustical pressure wave consists of 2 half cycles. 2 half cycles. So one complete cycle is 2 half cycles. 1/2 cycle is compression of the air molecules, and the other half cycle is rarefaction. Compression is a higher pressure. Rarefaction is a lower pressure. Okay? You idiots. The rate of air pressure fluctuation is called the frequency of a wave. So frequency, remember that. Frequency, rate, frequency, makes sense, right? In order to be classified as a sound, waves of pressure in air must fluctuate at a rate between 20 and 20,000 complete cycles per second. Frequency corresponds to the musical attribute of pitch, although pitch is a more complex attribute than frequency. It also involves amplitude. Generally speaking, the higher the frequency, the higher the perceived pitch of the sound. The unit hertz is now used to indicate frequency in cycles per second. So in idiot terms, the frequency, or the rate, or the amount of times the air cycles in 1 second determines the frequency. Obviously, that's why they call it the frequency, the rate. The cycles in 1 second. So the frequency of the waves of pressure in the air are measured in the number of complete cycles per second. This is important. CPS, cycles per second, and hertz are the same thing, although hertz is more commonly used. Well, hertz is now used to indicate cycles per second. In order to be classified as a sound, the air pressure must fluctuate between 20 and 20,000 hertz, or cycles per second. Frequency, hertz, cycles per second, whatever, corresponds to pitch. However, pitch also involves another factor, which is amplitude. But generally speaking, the lower the pitch, the lower the perceived pitch, or the note, or the sound, the lower the frequency, or the hertz, or the complete cycles per second. And vice versa. The higher the perceived pitch, or note, or sound, the higher the frequency, or cycles per second. So the amount of time required for one complete cycle, this is no longer idiot terms. The amount of time required for one complete cycle of a sound wave is called the period of a wave. The wave a wave's period is expressed in seconds per cycle, and this is found by using the equation period equals 1 divided by frequency. Oh my god. Sound waves travel through the air at a speed of, I'm just gonna go straight to idiot terms, all right? Idiot terms. The period of the period is the amount of time required to complete one cycle of a sound wave. Period is expressed in cycles per second. Sorry. Oh shit. Not that. Period is the amount of time required to complete one cycle of a sound wave. Period is expressed in seconds per cycle and is found using the equation period, or seconds per cycle, is equal to 1 divided by frequency. Oh, now I'm confused. It's okay. Just bear with me. Period, or seconds per cycle, is equal to 1 divided by frequency, which is cycles per second. What? Yes, 1 divided by frequency is equal to period. But here's an interesting question. What is 1 divided by period? The answer is frequency. Okay, again for all you idiots. 1 divided by frequency is equal to period. 1 divided by period is equal to frequency. Okay, thanks, Jackson. But what does that even mean? Okay, frequency is seconds per cycle. Sorry, period is seconds per cycle. Frequency is cycles per second. Bear with me. Remember how I said in order to be classified as a sound, the air pressure must fluctuate between 20 hertz or the lowest, 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. Okay, those are frequencies, right? So for 20 hertz, the lowest possible number of cycles per second to still be classified as a sound. 20 hertz. What is the period of 20 hertz? 0.05 seconds. How did I get this? 1 divided by frequency is equal to period. 20 hertz. 1 divided by 20, or frequency, is equal to 0.05. 1 divided by 20 is 0.05, and period is seconds per cycle. So the period of 20 hertz is 0.05 seconds. Okay, this is a lot. We aren't even off the first page and I'm exhausted, but there's one other thing we're leaving out. Wavelength. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Wavelength, the distance covered by one complete cycle of frequency. The distance covered by one complete cycle of frequency. Wavelength. Now, what's the equation for this one? Speed of sound divided by frequency is equal to wavelength. Now, I can hear the gears grinding in your stupid, fragile, idiot heads because they're grinding in mine. Speed of sound, what is that? Well, the answer is it depends, which is the last answer I wanted to hear. I would so much rather the answer be like 7 or 12 or involve pi somehow, but no, it depends. So, in outer space, for instance, the answer is 0. 0 meters per second, 0 cycles per second. 0 feet per second. It doesn't matter. It's 0. Wavelength in space is 0 because sound cannot travel in a vacuum. Therefore, sound does not travel in space because, like I said earlier, sound is fluctuating waves of pressure. In idiot terms, wiggly air. Sound is wiggly air, and in space there is no medium for sound to travel through. In idiot terms, in space there's no air to wiggle. Okay? So, the speed of sound at sea level at 59 degrees Fahrenheit is 1,130 feet per second. Okay, so that's not really helpful at all because I'm not a physicist and I'm not a fucking weatherman. I can just sing good. So here's what we're gonna do because I'm learning this as I go and as I teach it. So we're just gonna remember that wavelength is the speed of sound divided by frequency. And if we really, really have to know that in the future, if we really, really have to know how to find the speed of sound in 30-degree weather in the mountains, okay, we'll figure it out. But I'm not so sure we need to know how to do that right now, or will need to know how to do that. But here we are at the top of page 2, so let's review page 1 really quick. All right, so sound. What is sound? Basically wiggly air, fluctuating waves of pressure. And one cycle of acoustical pressure wave consists of two half cycles in one cycle. One half cycle of compression of the air molecules and one half cycle of rarefaction of air molecules, right? Compression is a higher pressure, rarefaction is a lower pressure. I wish I could show you. Check this out. You see this? That says, one of this says pressure. You see, higher, lower, pressure, higher, lower, compression, rarefaction. See? All right, we're still going. The frequency of a sound wave is the rate or frequency of the air pressure fluctuation. Frequency is complete cycles per second. So 20 hertz is 20 cycles per second because they're the same thing. 20 hertz is one half cycle of compression followed by one half cycle of rarefaction 20 times in 1 second. Pitch is how we perceive frequency. So let's see. And let me see. Is that an A? So and So one of those is 100. Sorry. I'm so ADHD. This is why I'm doing this in the first place. Which one has a lower frequency? The second one. The lower the frequency, the lower the perceived pitch. The higher the frequency, the higher the perceived pitch. Is like 440 cycles per second and 440 hertz, and is like 220 cycles per second or 220 hertz. So again, the higher the frequency, the higher the perceived pitch, and at the lower the frequency, the lower the perceived pitch. So there you go. The period is the amount of time or the period it takes to complete one cycle of a sound wave. The period is the amount of time or the period it takes to complete one cycle of a sound wave. The frequency is the amount of cycles in one wave per second. The frequency is the amount of cycles in one wave per second. And wavelength is the distance covered by one complete cycle of a frequency. I hope you get it. All right, page 2. It's actually page 3. So when I said page 1 yesterday, it was actually page 2 in reality. So we're on page 3, really. I'm just gonna skip this, but basically what we're talking about is right now we're talking about the electrical representation of sound. And so an audio signal is what sound looks like. It is exactly what the sound looks like. The fluctuation of the wave or the current or the signal perfectly captures the acoustical energy it represents. So check this out. I'm just going to play this. This is without any effects or anything. Can you hear that? That's just me like hitting this this crash on a floor tom, and basically that's what it sounds like in a recording. And you can see that this is what they say it looks like, but if you zoom in you can see, check this out, this is exactly what the sound looks like. This is the audio signal, and then when you hit it, it says 12.3. That's the signal level. So the amplitude is the strength or the level of the audio signal. This is called the signal level, like I just said. And when I said 12.3, I was referring to 12.3 decibels, because the signal level is specified in decibels. So you kind of have to know that. And it's kind of self-explanatory, but phase is what we're going to talk about next. And in idiot terms, the phase of the signal is expressed in degrees. So one complete cycle, like we said yesterday, of a sound wave is 360 degrees. One complete cycle is 360 degrees. And the phase of the phase signal basically represents what the sound looks like at a certain point in time. So like when I hit that, this is like at a certain point in time, this is what it looks like. So this is 3 minutes and 50 seconds into the song, but this is what it looks like at 3 minutes and 49 seconds and 24.74 milliseconds. This is exactly what it looks like. So phase is basically, let me see. Phase is really only concerned when you're dealing with alike recordings. So for instance, like a double tracked bass or overhead mics, for instance. Overhead mics are like you're recording drums, right? And there's a mic here and a mic here. Those are overhead mics. And so for overhead mics, that's two audio signals or recordings of the same source or sound that might be similar enough where they would have to be phase shifted. So like with two sine waves, for instance, a sine wave is a pure tone with no harmonics, meaning no additional frequencies. Two sine waves, which just look like that, a sine wave just looks like that. Two sine waves of the same frequency would be perfectly in phase if their troughs, which is this, and their crests, which is this, line up perfectly. So perfectly in phase or at 0 degrees would create an audio signal 2 times louder. So let's say on their own, each sine wave has a signal level of 0 decibels. So just one sine wave on its own has 0 decibels. And then both played at the same time perfectly in phase would be plus 6 decibels. But if you were to phase shift one of the sine waves over 90 degrees or 270 degrees, which is 1/4 or 3/4 of a cycle, because one cycle is 360 degrees, so 90 degrees is 1/4 of 360, and 270 is 3/4 of 160, there would be some phase cancellation, but not completely. So both sine waves, when played together at 90 degrees or 270 out of phase, would be plus 3 decibels. Half the sound is being canceled. But if you were to phase shift one of the sine waves 180 degrees or half of a cycle, they would be completely out of phase. So in other words, the waves would be the inverse of each other. So when there's a trough in one goes down, the other one is going up. There's a crest in the other one, and vice versa. When one's going up, the other one's going down. And when this happens, when identical audio signals are completely out of phase, you will hear nothing. So like phase can be really important to sound mixing. With mixing, a bunch of different audio signals are being processed and affected and mixed together in order to create one audio signal, a mix or a master. And phase can be really important in how these sounds function and add together, coalesce, as it were. They can come together and they can unite. It can be great and it can be beautiful, or it can be like a dull mess. And that rests heavily on the shoulders of phase. Page 4, part 1. This is the basic purpose of a sound system. So a sound system is made up of different electronic components, which sounds kind of confusing, but here's the deal. A sound system was designed for one purpose: to amplify sound, to increase the strength of sound. But why? There are several reasons why one might want to amplify or increase the strength of sound, but the 3 most common reasons are A is basically clearly audible. So to help people hear things better. Say I'm in an auditorium, right? I've got a good speaking voice. If you're in the front row, you can hear me, but if you're in the back, what about the back? A sound system may be used so that my voice is clearly audible, not just to the front, but also to those in the back of the auditorium. Note, in this case, the goal is to make my voice sound to the people in the auditorium as loud as if I were close. Not louder than if I were up close, but as loud as if I were up close. A is clearly audible. So B is basically larger than life. Say I'm in a vocal group, right? Like Pentatonics or something. It's me and like 5 other people, all right? Say we're in a jazz club. A is basically clearly audible, and B is basically larger than life. So with A, we'll be clearly audible, but it isn't necessarily going to be exciting. We'll just sound like a bunch of Christmas carolers, but not Take 6, not Pentatonics. So a sound system can give my group a much greater musical impact by making it seem larger than life. B. C is basically sound in a remote location. So I used to work at this church, right? And we would be in the crowd or the seats of the congregation, whatever you want to call it. And the band or the preacher or the reader, whoever, would be on stage. So for us in the audience or the seats or whatever you want to call it, the sound would be either A or B, clearly audible or larger than life, depending on what was going on stage. So for a band, you might want them to seem larger than life. But with a reader, there's not much reason to make them larger than life. You just need to be able to clearly understand them. But there was a lot of pregnant women and a lot of new moms at this church. So this means that there's definitely going to be a need for breastfeeding and a breastfeeding location. So these moms are going to go to a remote location where they can handle their business. But in this remote location, you can't hear the reader or you can't hear the band or the preacher or whatever. So what we did is we routed the sound to a remote location, enabling these mothers to continue to hear the sound from a separate room. Now the sound in the separate room does not need to be as loud as the speakers. Basically this church was more of a concert venue than it was a church. So this third option C, what this did was allow these mothers to continue to hear the sound, but also not be bombarded with the same level of amplitude that it would take to satisfy or make the sound clearly audible for the whole crowd. So there's one last one. Basically, D, which I said there are only 3, but basically there are sound systems that are used to play recorded or broadcast music, and the difference is that instead of a microphone or electronic instrument, it's like a radio or an iPod or CD. Okay, page 4, part 2. I'm just going to go straight into idiot terms because I had a really hard time trying to figure out what this meant, and now I totally understand. So let's just start. Here's what sound systems do. They amplify sound, right? Like I said earlier, they amplify sound. But how? Sound systems. They convert, number 1, they convert sound into electrical energy. Number 2, they increase the power of that electrical energy and turn that energy, number 3, turn that energy back into sound again. Okay, so sound goes into a sound system. Number 1, that sound is converted into energy. Number 2, that power, the power of that energy is increased. And number 3, that energy is converted back into sound. Okay, so transducers and signal processors. Those are new terms, transducers and signal processors. Like I just said, sound goes into a sound system, and sound is just acoustical energy. And number 1 was converting sound into electrical energy. So here's what a transducer does. It converts energy in one form to energy in another form. In this case, it would be acoustical energy or sound into electrical energy. So step 1 and step 3 are similar in that step 1 is sound going in as acoustical energy and being converted into electrical energy. And step 3 is that electrical energy being converted from electrical energy going back out as acoustical energy. So what's step 2? Step 2 is signal processing. Signal processors basically take an audio signal and change one or more aspects of that audio signal. From the name, it's pretty self-explanatory. Signal processing. So step 1 is acoustical energy or sound. It's when acoustical energy or sound is converted into electrical energy or an audio signal. And step 2 is signal processing. It's taking that audio signal and it's processing it. So let's take a step back. The input transducer, number 1, is like a mic or a pickup. The acoustical energy goes in and is converted into electrical energy. In other words, sound goes in through the input transducer and is converted into an audio signal. Then, 2, that audio signal goes into the signal processor and is altered somehow. In its simplest form, a signal processor just increases the power of a signal, right? This signal processor is called an amplifier or an amp. Just increases the sound of that signal. But in sound systems, this step 2 can manipulate the sound using a multitude of devices. This could be preamps or mixers or effects units, power amplifiers, and so on. And if you don't know some of those terms, you will at some point. But basically, step 2 is taking that audio signal and processing it somehow by making it louder, by affecting it, by preamps, whatever. The last one, 3, the output transducer, is a loudspeaker or headphones. It converts the amplified or otherwise processed audio signal from electrical energy back into acoustical energy. In other words, back into sound. All right, so this is page 5. I'm going to start out in idiot terms. So let's talk a little bit more about input transducers. Now this is page 5, part 1. Like I said a minute ago, transducers convert sound into audio signals. Simple enough. Now there are several different kinds of input transducers you might encounter when using a sound reinforcement system. The 7 most common types of input transducers are 1, air pressure or velocity microphones, 2, contact pickups, 3, magnetic pickups, 4, tape heads, 5, phonograph pickups or cartridges, 6, laser pickups, and 7, optical pickups. Now, I don't know most of these at the time of writing this. I only recognize about half of these. This book was written in like 1987, which has been revised, but some of this might still be outdated. But here's the deal. I want to know all of this. Sometimes analog is just superior. Sometimes there's just a more interesting way to do things. And while I might not need to know about some of these things in order to work in Ableton or Logic or Pro Tools, it can't hurt to know all of these. And I certainly want to, so let's get into it. Number 1, air pressure or velocity microphones. I'm reading this straight from the book. Air pressure or velocity microphones convert sound waves traveling in air into an audio signal traveling into a mic cable. Simple enough. So, it's just a microphone. It's just a microphone. So now we're in section 1 of this book, right? If we're confused about the difference between air pressure and velocity microphones, that's cool. It's all good. I'm reading straight from the book again. Each characteristic of input transducer, each type of input transducer has its own characteristics, which must be properly understood if the transducer is to be used properly, right? So it's good that we have questions, but that's because we want to use the equipment properly, and in order to do so, we must understand it. But, and I'm reading again, section 10 of this handbook deals with microphones in detail. So if you don't completely understand something now, hopefully by the end of this book you will. They'll probably get into it. It's obviously very, very thorough. So if we get to the end of this book and you still don't understand something, at least you'll have enough knowledge to know the right questions to ask. Number 2 is contact pickups. Contact pickups are basically transducers that are touching the instrument. They're like a doctor's stethoscope. So if they're used to convert sound waves in a dense medium, hold on. They're used to convert sound waves in a dense medium into an audio signal. So by dense medium, we mean wood or metal or skin. So sometimes contact pickups are used on acoustic stringed instruments, such as guitar or mandolin or violin, etc. Sometimes contact pickups are used to sense drum hits or triggering electronic samples, etc. I'm reading from the book. Usually of the crystal type, occasionally capacitive. I guess what they mean, I guess they're assuming that you already know that some microphones have a sort of crystal in them. I wasn't aware of this. At some point, they'll break down each component of a microphone and how it works, but for now, we'll just have to assume that most contact pickups have a crystal in them. And when they say occasionally capacitive, that means that it has the ability to store an electric charge. I gotta be honest now, I feel like an idiot, but we will understand all of this at some point. I've done a little outside reading, and it appears that some contact mics are adhesive. Some you have to use a thumbtack, or you can use rubber bands or sticky gauze or double-sided tape. I guess it just depends on whether or not you intend to remove the mic from the instrument anytime soon. But number 3 is magnetic pickups. I'm reading from the book again. Magnetic pickups convert fluctuating waves of induced magnetism into an audio signal, found on electronic stringed instruments. Okay, so an electric guitar, an electric bass, you've seen how they have a headstock, right? Then they have the neck, and then they have those pickups under the strings right around where you're strumming. Those are magnetic pickups. Usually, depending on the instrument or how many pickups it has, you'll see small silver dots under each string for each pickup. Those are small, powerful magnets. Basically how magnetic pickups work is that the strings are metal and the pickups are metal. They're magnetic. So they convert the fluctuating waves of induced magnetism into an audio signal. Whatever frequency the string is vibrating at, this input transducer converts into an audio signal. So that's it. Tape heads, I'm reading this from the book again. Tape heads convert fluctuating magnetic fields imprinted on a magnetic recorder tape into an audio signal. Okay. A tape head is a type of transducer. Obviously, a tape head takes fluctuating magnetic signals and converts them into an audio signal. Now, these tapes are the same kinds of tapes that are used on the backs of credit cards and debit cards and gift cards, because the strips of magnetic tape on the backs of these cards store data the same way that other magnetic tapes do. VHS tapes, cassette tapes, reels, etc. So these use the same principle of physics to store and read back information. I'm not going to get into the physics right now, but we might have to know them in the future. I'm confident that we will. But what you need to remember is that tape heads are input transducers that use magnetic fields to store and read back information, in this case, in the form of an audio signal. Number 5, phonograph pickups or cartridges. I'm reading this from the book. Phonograph pickups or cartridges convert physical movement of a stylus or a needle into an audio signal. Okay, so a phonograph is a record player. So what is a phonograph pickup or a cartridge? Well, it's that thing at the end of the arm that reaches over and onto the record and plays it. And by plays it, I mean converts the physical movement of a stylus or a needle, the needle, into an audio signal. So I did a little extra research. I guess there are 2 kinds of cartridges, magnetic and ceramic. Maybe there are more, but according to this book, and I'm reading again, in professional use systems, the moving magnetic type of cartridge is the most common. So I guess the magnetic cartridge is the most common. So common, So common that they wouldn't even think to mention the ceramic cartridge. So if we need to know more, trust me, it seems like they're probably going to tell us. Number 6, we're almost finished. Number 6, reading from the book again, laser pickups. Laser pickups convert imprinted patterns on a compact disc into a digital data stream that is then translated by a DAC, or a digital to audio converter, into an digital to analog converter into an analog audio system. So, what does that mean? Laser pickups. Okay, so a laser pickup is basically a transducer, right? Obviously, which means that, and this is getting pretty redundant, it takes in one form of energy and converts it into another form of energy. So obviously, because this is what we've been talking about, this transducer is converting one form of energy into an audio signal. And the writers didn't think to mention anything except for a compact disc or a CD, so it's converting digital data from a CD into an analog audio system. They say it's translated by a DAC, or a digital to analog converter. So if I'm understanding correctly, laser pickups convert the information on a compact disc into digital data. Then this data is translated by a DAC, or a digital to analog converter, and then into an analog audio system. Sounds good. Last one, optical pickups. So optical pickups, number 7, convert variations in the density or transparent area of a photographic film into an audio signal used for motion picture soundtracks. Okay, so it's an input transducer, right? And it's converting some sort of light energy into an audio signal, which is really fascinating. So I guess what it's doing is using light sensing electronics to detect the vibration of the string. Now this would be more accurate. This would be more accurate and provide a more flat response than magnetic pickups, because optical pickups eliminate the magnetic influence. A company selling optical pickups said that their optical sensors provide a flat, even response throughout the tonal spectrum of the vibrating string, producing a sonic foundation that accurately represents the intended musical expression of the player. That's all 7. Okay, so this is part 2 of page 5 and part 1 of page 6. So here's the deal. This is output transducers, and I'm going to start out in idiot terms, but then I'm just kind of going to read what they've put because it's pretty self-explanatory. So output transducers, like I said earlier, output transducers convert audio signals or electric energy back into sound or acoustical energy. There are several different types of output transducers, but the most commonly encountered are A, woofer loudspeakers, B, mid-range loudspeakers, C, tweeter loudspeakers, D, full-range loudspeakers, E, subwoofer loudspeakers, F, super tweeter loudspeakers, G, monitor loudspeakers, and H, headphones. So basically this is the output transducer, which means that, sound goes in, it's processed, and then it goes out into one of these 8 output transducers. So each type, I'm reading from the book, each type of output transducer has its own characteristics, which must be understood if the transducer is to be used properly. Section 13 of this manual deals with output transducers in detail. So, great. So let's just do it. I'm just reading from the book now. A, woofer loudspeakers. Woofer loudspeakers were designed specifically to reproduce low frequencies, although sometimes reproduce some mid frequencies. So that means usually below 500 hertz and not higher than 1.5 kilohertz. Typically, cone type drivers are used as woofers measuring from 8 to 18 inches in diameter. Cone type drivers are like they look like cones, and you know what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to delete that part. We'll know later, you know. I don't think that should be important. All right, B, mid-range loudspeakers. Mid-range loudspeakers were designed specifically to reproduce mid-range frequencies, typically above 500 hertz, but usually not higher than 6 kilohertz. All right. C, tweeter loudspeakers. Tweeter loudspeakers were designed to reproduce the highest frequencies, normally higher than 1.5 kilohertz, usually above 6 kilohertz. D, full range loudspeakers. So this is an integrated or combined systems incorporating woofer and tweeter, and if used, mid-range drivers. So this is a full range system in a single enclosure. The name implies that they are designed to reproduce the full audio range, more or less, but in practical terms, their range rarely extends below 60 hertz. So there's a little note here. It says a full range driver is a single loudspeaker, not a multi-driver system, which alone is designed to reproduce the full audio frequency range. So basically what this means is that a full range loudspeakers is just a single loudspeaker. It's not a multi-driver system. E, subwoofer loudspeakers, used to extend the low frequency range of a full frequency range system, you know? So this basically, the subwoofer includes frequencies down to 20 to 30 hertz. Their frequency range rarely extends above 300 hertz. So this is really, really low. Cone type, okay, I'm gonna not do that. Okay, super tweeter loudspeakers used to extend the range. It's like the highest frequencies. It's super tweeter. It's not tweeter, it's super tweeter. So this is usually above 10 kilohertz. And yeah, so that's F. Then you got G. G is monitor loudspeakers. Full range loudspeakers that are pointed at the performer on stage. So if you've ever been on stage and there's like those wedges, those are monitors, all right? So they're pointed at the performer on stage rather than out at the audience. They are used to return a portion of the program to the performer to help him or her stay in tune or in time or whatever. In recording studios, a studio monitor or control room or monitor or loudspeaker or whatever, it's a high accuracy loudspeaker system designed to permit evaluation of the sound being recorded. All right, and H is headphones. Headphones, you know, full range transducers designed to fit snugly on the ears. So some designs block out ambient or external sound. Others do not. Headphones are sometimes used in sound systems as monitors for click tracks, or maybe used by engineers to check the live mix or recording during a performance. But headphones also appear as components of intercom systems. It's headphones, come on. And that's output transducers. All right, I got a haircut, and this is the last thing. This is the last video before section 2. So we're almost finished with section 1. All right, so idiot terms. Let's just say I'm in a lecture hall, right? I'm running the soundboard, and there's a panel discussion involving 3 speakers. So 3 speakers, 3 microphones. Remember, the 3 sections of a sound system are A, the input transducers, B, signal processing, and C, output transducers. So let's just start with A, the input transducers. We've talked about all this, but this is like a great summary. The input transducers are the 3 microphones, and they convert the sound or acoustical energy that they pick up from the panelists, and they convert it into audio signals or electrical energy, and that travels down the cables to the processing equipment. Then signal processing. Now, we didn't really talk about signal processing and like what goes into it. So the three microphones are connected to individual outputs on the mixing console. The console serves the following functions: 1, preamplification; 2, equalization; and 3, mixing. And so we didn't really go into those earlier, so let's just do it now. So 1, preamplification. The console's microphone inputs section amplifies the level of the audio signal from each microphone, bringing it to line level. In idiot terms, preamplification basically amplifies the sound until it is at standard level, also known as line level. Most microphones operate below line level, so preamplification is required. Then, number 2 is equalization. So if you've heard of, the console provides the means to adjust the tonal balance of each microphone individually. This allows the console operator to achieve a more pleasing or intelligible sound quality. So we're going to need idiot terms for this one. Equalization, also known as EQ, is when you boost or cut certain frequencies so that you may adjust the tonal balance in order to make for a clearly audible or intelligible audio signal, right? Then, sorry, there's a typo and I need this to refer back to. Mixing, number 3. The console adds the equalized signals of the microphones together to produce a single line level output signal. In idiot terms, mixing is the process of arranging and assembling multiple tracks or audio signals together to produce a single line level output signal. I'm reading from the book. The output of the console is connected to a power amplifier. The power amplifier boosts the console's fine level 0.1 to 100 milliwatts output signal to a level suitable to drive the loudspeaker, 0.5 to 500 watts. Okay, so let's break it down. The output of the console is connected to a power amplifier. So an amplifier. The power amplifier boosts the console's fine level output signal to a level suitable to drive the loudspeaker. Okay, so there were some numbers in there in that sentence, and I took them out. And before I add them back in, let's just look at some things really quickly. So, fine level output signal and a level suitable to drive the loudspeaker. Fine level, 0.1 to 100 milliwatts, and then level suitable to drive the loudspeaker, 0.5 to 500 watts. So the output of the console is connected to a power amplifier, right? The power amplifier boosts the console's fine level output signal, 0.1 to 100 milliwatts, to a level suitable to drive the loudspeaker, 0.5 to 500 watts. So milliwatts and watts are units of power, and either Section 2 or Section 3 will deal with decibel, bells, watts, and milliwatts. But what you need to know now is that the power amplifier boosts the console's fine level output signal to a level suitable to drive the loudspeaker. How is this accomplished? Through increasing the power. Last, output transducer. So, now we are at the end of Section 1. Remember that, okay, this is the last page, so we're almost finished. The output transducer, which we've already talked about quite a bit, in this case is the loudspeaker. Remember, the loudspeaker converts the power amplifier's output signal back into sound. The level of the sound is much higher than that of the three panelists speaking unaided. In idiot terms, the output transducer is doing its job. Actually, the whole thing is working. The sound system is doing its job. Remember when I was talking about what if I was speaking in an auditorium? The people in the front would hear me. Sorry, the people in the front would hear me. But what about the people in the back? Well, basically, the signal processor is sending the audio signal or electrical energy to the output transducer. So what does a transducer do? Everybody with me? The transducer converts one form of energy into another form of energy. And in this case, because it's an output transducer, the loudspeaker is converting the audio signal or the electrical energy that's being sent to it from the power amplifier or the signal processor back into electrical energy or sound. So the level of the sound is much higher than that of the three panelists speaking unaided. I'm reading again. There is another less obvious but equally important aspect of the sound system, the environment. When the sound output of the loudspeaker propagates into the hall, it is altered by the acoustical characteristics of the space. So in idiot terms, if let's say I'm in the 7th row, for instance, right? When the sound reaches my ears, it has been altered. The output transducer produces sound. By the time it hits my ears, it has been altered by the acoustical characteristics of the space. I'm reading again. The room may have little effect on the clarity of the sound. For example, the room is dead or non-reverberant. If the room is highly reverberant and the sound system is not designed and is not installed to deal with the acoustics of the space, the effect on the sound may be so severe to render the sound system useless. So in idiot terms, basically what this means is that sometimes the room has no effect on your ability to hear and clearly understand the sound, but sometimes it does. The environment, I'm reading again, the environment is an integral part of the sound system, and its effects must be considered when the system is installed. Part 1, sections 5 and 6 of this manual deal with, in detail, the effects of the environment on sound systems. So every sound system, no matter how large, is merely an extension of this basic model. The same principles that apply to this simple sound system also apply to large-scale sound reinforcement systems. In idiot terms, you must take the environment or the venue into account. So to quote the book, again, the environment is an integral part of the sound system. Regardless of where you are, meaning the setting, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're in the Ryman or the Bridgestone Arena or the Titan Stadium or Blackbird Studios or in your bedroom. Every sound system, no matter how large, is merely an extension of this basic model. The same principles that apply to a simple sound system also apply to a large-scale concert reinforcement system.